Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining me for my first edition of Quick Hitters with Rocco Million Live on Real Progressives. Today, I just wanted to come on real quick and talk about a Fox News segment that I just saw about socialism. And I have to come on live to address the misinformation and propaganda that was put out and show everybody just how easy it is to counter, especially these particular lies and scare tactics with just a simple logic of our operational reality. And so that's what I'm going to do today. Real quick and do it under 10 minutes for everybody. That's going to be the theme of the quick hitter edition, with Rocco Million. I'm going to do this stuff real quick so that I could try and get the videos to be watched by more people so that the information gets digested. So, again, I'm going to be tearing up the mainstream narratives and scare tactics that keep us divided and fighting against our own interests. This time about socialism. I just saw a segment on Fox News where they put out a bunch of misinformation. And so the first thing I want to point out, and I always like to note, when I'm destroying this particular lie and scare tactic about socialism, especially with capitalists, I'll point out the hypocrisy, right off the bat, so-called Christians that reject the basic tenets of Jesus Christ, because he was a socialist revolutionary who fed the masses. He hung out with the criminals and the prostitutes. He preached against greed and capitalism, flipped tables in the temple. And somehow, people in America are able to reject that basic operational reality, even with their own Messiah, who they claim to follow and love. They hate everything that he preached, and they somehow justify it with cognitive dissonance and, a bunch of other things. So we got to make sure we blow that fantasy up and make these people face the reality, face the facts, and then address that and answer for that and square it. Square that freaking hole. So anyway, then you could also use the logic. All right, you can use just basic, simple logic of our operational reality to make people first understand, because most people don't even understand what socialism is. Number one, the traditional definition is socially owned means of production for the public purpose, or equitable distribution. So socially owned means of production and equitable distribution of the real resources. That's the traditional meaning. And so when, and then what I say is, as a democratic socialist, as a libertarian socialist, what I like to say is, the government is the real means of production. Taxation and spending determines everything in our society. That's basically central planning. How we tax and spend determines how we use the real resources of our whole nation for the general welfare of society, for the public purpose. So in reality, how every job that pays in dollars is dependent on the federal government, because only the federal government makes dollars. So that's the means of production, the real means of production. How government taxes and spends determines everything. And so what people need to understand is, we are guaranteed a socially owned government per the Constitution. The preamble to the Constitution, it mandates that our government promote and provide for the domestic tranquility, for the general welfare of society. And then Article 1, Section 8 takes it even a step further, and it mandates that Congress mint and tax from thin air to provide for the general welfare and common defense thereof. So these are operational facts that a lot of these capitalists and these people want to overlook, and we can't let them. Because the fact of the matter is, the markets and capitalism, they only exist to serve the general welfare of society. And it's our socially owned government's job to regulate capitalism, to regulate the private sector, to maintain the general welfare, the public purpose, to protect everybody's rights and maintain our general welfare of society. So, once you get that basic understanding, now things become easier. You got to one of their biggest scare tactics and one of the biggest misconceptions that people will have to socialism is that their taxes go up. Their taxes, this is what they were saying on Fox. Oh, well, Democrats think that they know how to spend our money better than we do. And they think that they're going to have to pay more in taxes to have a better standard of living. And so that really drives them away. And that stems from a misunderstanding of the simple logic of our operational reality, how our actual economy operates. And when you don't have that basic understanding, you're going to have a solution. And that's the case here, because taxes they're not used by the government to fund itself. Taxes never fund the federal government. Taxes can't even be collected until the government first spends dollars into the economy. So how could taxes ever fund the federal government? That's completely illogical. The dollars don't even exist to tax until government first spends dollars into existence. Per the Constitution, Article 1, Section 8. It mandates that Congress mint and tax, from thin air to provide for the general welfare. So all dollars are made at will from thin air by law. All right, government never needs money. That's not what taxing is about at the federal level. Taxing is about driving demand for the dollar. Okay, so in other words, taxation creates unemployment. And then only federal spending satisfies that condition with paid employment. That's what taxing is primarily about. It drives the demand for the dollar. When the government imposes tax on us in the private sector, now we're willing to sell our goods and labor for dollars to survive, pay our tax, and stay free. Now government has people. It could provision society with all those needed real resources, like a military, like an infrastructure, all these different things government can provision society with now using paid employment. That's what this is all about. That's how government satisfies its constitutional mandate to the general welfare of society. That's how government forced us to stop living off the land and start working for the general welfare of society per the Constitution. Okay, so it's sadistic for that government to force us to stop living off the land to instead work for the general welfare for the public purpose. And then our socially owned government forces millions to be unemployed and poor. 5% unemployment, governmental target, and maintain. So government will forcefully keep millions unemployed and poor. All right, this is another big point that people don't understand. That's sadistic, especially when you consider that our communities are crumbling across America, in need of work that is essential to the general welfare of society. Think about poisoned drinking water, collapsing bridges. All right, so you got to ask yourself, why on earth would it ever be consistent with the general welfare of society for our socially owned government to create and then keep millions unemployed and poor, while we have work all across America that isn't getting done, that's essential to the general welfare of society? And the answer is it would never be. That would never be consistent with government's mandate to the general welfare of society. Government can always make dollars by law from thin air to buy up all unemployment with a federally guaranteed living wage job program for everyone who wants it. This would balance the economy up front and maximize our productive capacity to meet everybody's base needs, or to raise everybody's standard of living with things like single-payer health care, with things like green sustainable energy, fully staffed schools, elderly care, you name it. There's so many things out there that we need. And government is forcing millions to be unemployed and poor by targeting 5% unemployment. And these same people that say socialism is so radical and fringe, they think this is completely acceptable. And it's status quo. Nobody even blinks an eye. But somehow, taking care of the public purpose is so illogical and so wrong. But, they're completely willing to endorse trickle-down economics, which leaves the bottom income distribution, the first to be fired in economic uptick economic downturn, and the last to be higher in an economic uptick. And that's completely fine, even though that leaves the majority of Americans in pain under artificial scarcity. That's completely logical, rational, but socialism, we're told, is, evil and somehow results in us having less freedom, as opposed to the police and economic terror we have inflicted on us today, all for the profits of the 1%. Somehow if government starts taking care of people and satisfying its constitutional mandate, somehow we lose our freedom. We got to make these people account for these discrepancies in their logic. That's the only way. The fact of the matter is, the only way you could balance a consumer-driven economy is by spending at the bottom. When we instead guarantee the jobs at a bottom income distribution, because they make up the largest segment of society, the more dollars that they have, the more they guarantee and demand the jobs of the skilled and educated above them. Demand naturally travels up. It doesn't trickle down. So it's really capitalism and trickle down that's the fringe, ideology. It's an ideology. It's based in fantasy. Our operational reality that I'm talking about right now is based in reality. It's actual logic. It's science. This is stuff we could describe. It's the reality. So yeah, the thing you have to remember is, capitalism only even exists in the private sector, and only to the extent that our socially owned government allows. The government owns the private sector completely, with its ability to impose tax and be the monopoly issuer of the only tax credit, dollars. All right. Plus, it has its legislative authority too. But nobody even owns property in America. We all rent. We all pay tax. The only free market is the black market. All right. And again, if you have a job that pays in dollars, it's already dependent on government spending. All right. So it's the markets and the private sector, they only exist to serve the general welfare. All right. It's up to our government to regulate properly, to spend and tax properly, to satisfy its constitutional mandate to the general welfare of society. I don't blame capitalists or anybody else, because they're not mandated by the Constitution to mint and tax to provide for the general welfare. When there's a problem in your society, you go with the socially owned government, who's mandated to satisfy the public purpose, the general welfare of society. So once we understand this stuff, even Republicans are less likely to oppose public purpose spending, because they love their kids too. They want a good America, a strong America. They just don't want their taxes to go up to pay for it. They don't want their taxes to go up to pay for other people's mistakes. Great news. Your taxes don't fund anything at the federal level. They're literally destroyed upon receipt. They only exist as an accounting identity after that. That's it. In a ledger, in a spreadsheet somewhere. All right. Taxes don't fund federal spending. Taxes you can't even collect a tax until government first spends dollars into existence. It's completely illogical to think that somehow taxes fund the federal government. The government is the currency issuer. It never needs revenue to spend and operate. Article 1 mandates that Congress mint and tax. They always say Congress has the power to purse, but then they never think that through, what that means. In the next breath, you hear people saying, oh, well, we need to get our revenues up. Oh, we need to tax the rich to spend on society. Oh, I would love that program, but we just can't afford it right now. This is at the heart of all of our problems, this misunderstanding, this, lies and scare tactics that are fed to us. They're specifically designed to keep us fighting amongst our own interests and against each other, instead of uniting in solidarity for the public purpose as mandated by our Constitution. So socialism is guaranteed by our Constitution. It really is democratic socialism, to be sure. All right. Again, the preamble mandates the government promote and provide for the general welfare of society and domestic tranquility. Look it up. Article 1, Section 8 mandates Congress mint and tax for the general welfare and common defense thereof. So that necessarily means government never needs revenue or profit to operate and spend. The money part of the equation is always infinite for our government. The only thing that matters is our government makes the required investments into our society and into our productive capacity to ensure we have enough real resources created and available for anybody to buy with any money. That's the only thing that matters here. So understand the simple logic of our operational reality to destroy these lies whenever you hear them. All right, especially the one about socialism, because socialism just basic logic and it only makes sense. It's the only way to have a sustainable consumer driven economy is to take care of the public purpose. We are mandated. We have a socially owned government to satisfy the public purpose and then let individuals make what they can from the balanced economy that creates. Our socially owned government is never supposed to work for the private purpose of the individual and for society to make do with the scraps, like it does today with trickle down economics, like it does today with the mainstream narratives that we hear. We'll talk about full employment. We're at full employment. The economy's great. Never mind, we're in record private debt to our eyeballs. More private debt than right before the global financial crisis. But guess what? The economy's great. Even people like Chris Cuomo, even the Democrats say this stuff. So don't get, in that trap of thinking it's just evil Republicans. All right. And that's what gets me about the socialism argument, too. Let me clarify this. Democrats are not socialists in any sense of the word. People like Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer, which was who the Fox News segment was talking about. And it's ironic because those people are right-wing neoliberals. They're capitalists, just like the Republican Party. Okay. Bernie Sanders maybe can be, considered Democratic socialists, but, Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer, no, they can't be. They're right wingers. So you need to under neoliberals. Exactly, Keith. So you need to understand the difference, and you need to know how filled with BS these people are. This is completely laughable. Why do politicians want us to believe that we fund the federal government? Absolutely, it's a great question, Mark. Why do politicians want us to believe that we fund the federal government? Because that supports the false idea that there is a limited number of dollars and justifies cutting social services and denial of progressive ideas as unaffordable. That's exactly right. And it's even more basic and simple than that. If people think money is finite, they're not going to rise up to fight to get the bottom more money, because that would mean they get less. So it's an intentional design to make us think, and make us less likely to help people at the bottom. But the fact is, money is not finite. Money is no object. It's simply a social construct. Dollars are just a law to satisfy tax. We can't run out of laws, so we can't run out of dollars. So, we don't need to take more off the rich so that the poor could have more. Okay, that we don't need to do that. We could tax the rich at 99% of their wealth and cut defense 100%. And that doesn't give our federal government one extra dollar to spend. Our government already has infinite spending capacity, period. Okay, all it does is writes a bill into law, and dollars are created out of thin air. That's the only way dollars are created. So understand this. We need to be making our government, our socially owned government, use our public sovereign infinite spending power on the public purpose, like it's mandated in the Constitution. Nowhere in the Constitution does it mandate Congress to mint and tax to make profits for the 1% at the expense of everybody else in society. It doesn't say that. That's fascism. But that's exactly what happens when our government targets unemployment. All right. Why on earth would government target that buffer stock of unemployed? It's to give a weapon to capital to wage war on labor with. All right. When our government's making sure millions are unemployed and poor, now the capitalist class don't have to give you that raise. They got millions of people outside poor. They're so desperate and unemployed that they're willing to do your job cheaper for starvation wages. And that's exactly why our wages have been stagnant from the 70s, while our productivity and our cost of living and corporate profits are all at record highs. It's not an accident. It's class warfare. It's wage suppression. Our socially owned government is engaged in fascism, and we collectively accept it because we believe the lies and the scare tactics that were specifically designed to keep us divided and fighting against our own interests. That's why it's so important to learn the actual operational reality of our of MMT. That MMT destroys all the lies and all the scare tactics with simple logic, and because of that, it unites all sides in solidarity for the public purpose, first and foremost, as mandated by our Constitution. And um, just to illustrate that point, go look up Mike Norman. This is a Republican. He's running for senator. Yet he's to the left of anybody in the DNC because he understands our actual operational reality. And so it destroys the ideologies and the partisan BS that, keep us fighting against each other. And it does it with the simple logic of how our economy actually operates. And all problems in our society are rooted in economics, and they all have their remedies in macroeconomics. So thanks a lot, guys, for joining me. I'm going to take off. I wanted to keep this a little bit shorter, but oh well. All right, take it easy.